forever young? Or am I faking on the tip of my tongue? There's a sarcasm waiting for you. I'm willing to trade my soul for a bit of your charm. There's no way I fade into oblivion, 'cause I'll keep shining over you all. And if your wings entwining, you better face the fall, keep trying again. Oh yeah, keep trying again. There's mud on the floor, disparate people trying to get through the door, although the room's already crowded. But I'll keep shining over you all. And if your wings entwining, you better face the fall, keep trying again. Oh yeah, keep trying again. Zeros, everybody's trying to be heroes, when all they have to say to be okay is I don't know. And keep trying again. I'll keep shining over you all. With your wings entwining, you better face the fall. Zero, everybody's trying to be heroes, when all they have to say to be okay is I don't know. Are you okay? I'm not that sure. Forever young, or am I faking on the tip of my tongue? There's a sarcasm waiting for you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to race number 8 of season 52 of the RTG Talladega Challenge, as we get set to set the stage for who's going to be in this season's playoffs. I'm Seth Cole alongside Zach Freemau, and to just give a little bit of a precursor, normally they have 10 regular season races here, but because they took an off week, there's only 9 regular season races, so it's go time for a lot of those drivers, Zach, that are down there 11th through 20th to get a win, as well as those drivers that might just be below 20th in the standings. If they win, they could put themselves in playoff competition as well.
Thank you, Seth. Good evening. Good evening, race fans. It's good to see everybody. As you mentioned, 2 more races remaining on this regular season before we work our way into the playoffs. Now, what this brings up is a lot of different scenarios. Drivers, as Seth mentioned, between the 20th and 11th positions that have gotten a victory at some point this season. And then, of course, the top 10 in the point standings at the end of the regular season. All of those drivers will be involved in our playoffs. So as it stands now, I believe we have about 11 or 12 drivers in total in contention. But Seth, we've still got a lot of shaking and moving left to do. 39 car field tonight, the biggest field that we've seen all season long. And as we've talked about many of the last few weeks, this could mean big point swings on the racetrack. And at the end of the night, we could see some drivers that don't have those victories secured, in the second half of that top 10 potentially be falling out while others look to move in.
That's the biggest X factor, I think, here tonight. Biggest field we've had so far this season with 39 drivers. Up to this point, we've had 3 fields of 37. So even those 2 extra cars can certainly play a huge factor heading into next week into who's in a playoff position and who's going to be trying to get themselves into a playoff position. And of course, as well, as you mentioned, top 10 in points. So there's a lot of drivers that are just lingering around that area as well, like Chris Emery, Jerm Lewis, Bernie Mobbs, Chris Elliott. These are drivers that we've seen be consistent this season. Are they in a must-win situation right now, though? Because depending on what happens here tonight, there's a couple of drivers that could leapfrog them, and they'd be on the outside looking in next week.
Well, I think the mentality is going to be of it, honestly, Seth, you have to go. There is no more positions that you can afford to lose out on the racetrack because that could realistically end your playoff hopes right there. Now, if you look at our 10th place in the point standings, we've got Billy Elliser, but we do know Billy Elliser is locked in with a win earlier in the season. So regardless what happens to him, he's got guys behind him, Bernie Mobbs, Chris Elliott, Richard Martin, Hank Middleton, and other names of the such who are really looking to capitalize. They need to get a victory because without that victory, they're stuck. And any major incident on the racetrack could end the end of their season right there.
One driver that hasn't been to victory lane that's been very consistent this year, 3rd in points, Grant Wesley. But if you look right behind him in 6th place, you've got Jeff Cravello. This has been a career year for him. Not only is he positioning himself to make it into the playoffs, but also the bracket series has been going on. He'll be going up against Bernie Mobbs in the semifinals here tonight, and he is our in-race, pre-race reporter here tonight. We'll see if we can get a word with the driver of the 56. Hey, Jeff, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us? Yeah, we'll see if we can get him here. Hey, Jeff, you got us up here in the booth? Like we might not have a hold of Jeff here. He might be getting himself ready for this event. We'll see if we can get him here momentarily before these drivers grid up. So, the battle for the pole position continues on between the teammates Bob Seminara and Joe DeSpirito. Now, for the last 2 weeks, Seminara has come out on top. This week, he came up just 1,000th short of being able to capture his 3rd straight victory. So right now, in terms of pole positions, it's Joe DeSpirito 5 and Bob Seminara 3.
Absolutely. And we know these two stress starting up front, and they are fairly convinced that if they can start up front and keep themselves there, they can keep their cars safe and be in contention at the end of the race. So you look at the 3rd position tonight, the 54 car, typically run by Robbie Nisas, being piloted by Chuck Mcclure. So keep an eye out when you hear us say that Mcclure name. It's not going to be that black number 17 that we're so used to seeing out there. It's going to be one of the Mobbs Motors cars, or one of the nicest cars. So right behind him, the reason I said Mobbs Motors is Bernie Mobbs, one of those guys, Seth, that we have talked about last season, had himself in a really comfortable position, worked his way into the playoffs. But I would think for him tonight, just a little bit of urgency that he's got to be feeling behind the wheel.
Not sure at a super speedway how much this plays into it, but Bernie Mobbs was fastest in practice. And going back there to Chuck Mcclure, 2nd time that he's pulling the sub duty here tonight. Of course, he filled in for Mark Paglia's 28 earlier on the season. And don't forget, Dante Ricky finished 2nd here last week driving that 54 Dodge. So we'll see if Mcclure might be able to get a good finish there with that machine also. We're going to see if we can get in touch here with our pre-race reporter, Jeff Cravello, in just a moment, but we'll give you your starting lineup for tonight's event. Biggest field of the season is Joe DeSpirito and Bob Seminara. They're going to make up the front row with Chuck Mcclure and Bernie Mobbs in the second row, I should say. Bob Dixon and Grant Wesley in row 3, Joshua Talek, Mark Paglia row 4, and then David Cannon and Rodney Sullins. They'll complete the top 10, followed by Tim Nofsker, Chris Emery, that's row 6. Row 7 will find Jeremy Jeffries and Sonny Tallman, Billy Elliser and Ken Roberts, along with Dave Melson. They're going to be 15th through 17th, with Gary Hurst on the outside of row 9. Top 20 completed by Chris Elliott, and the driver we're going to hope to touch base with here momentarily, Jeff Cravello. 21st is going to be Glenn Harris with Bobby Farrell back in the 92 this week in 22nd. Wiley Coate and Jerm Lewis in row 12. Terry Bombard and Andrew All in row 13. Todd Mallory will make his debut here tonight as he'll roll off from 27th alongside of Wayne Pribnow. Row 15 is where we'll find Jim Black and Richard Martin. Black running some new colors here tonight.
Okay.
Behind them, you're going to find Mike Rogers in 31st. He was the last driver to take time. John Godfrey will be to his outside in 32nd. Then it's Donnie Garrett, Hank Middleton back in row 17. Perry Bond, Andrew Miller, Dante Rickey, Doug Woolley, and Cy Jones will complete the rest of the field. Let's see if now we can get a word with our pre-race reporter, the 56 of Jeff Cravello. Hey, Jeff, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us, man?
Go ahead.
Man, a great season for you so far. 2 races to go. You're 6th in the points. So what's the goal coming into this penultimate race of the regular season?
Top 10 is my goal. And then beat the number 90 car.
Hey, Jeff, it's Zach up here in the booth, man. It's been real good being able to see you run up there, run up front, run real strong all season long. We've seen you consistently up in that top 5, top 10, using strategy more often than not to get your way up there and then remaining up there at the end of the race. Is that what you'll be looking to do again tonight?
Yeah, just trying to avoid any early trouble and just keep the 4 wheels on the ground.
Jeff, you talked about the fact of trying to beat that 90. You're in the final 4 there for the winner's bracket and the Tally Challenge. I mean, what would it mean for you to be able to move on to that final round, depending on who you take on in that other semifinal battle?
Well, I was there once before, and I lost 2 straight and didn't do it. Like you said, I'm looking for the points first, and then bracket is next.
All right, well, best of luck to you, Jeff. We're going to let you get to it.
Thank you, sir. Enjoy
Continue
the
on
show.
that consistency. So out of turn 4 they come. Another driver running some new colors there. The 712 of Bob Seminara. Of course, as we get closer to the end of the regular season into playoffs, drivers bringing out those newer liveries. So we'll see if Seminara will be able to become this season's second multi-time winner, is Joe DeSpirito right now the only driver that holds that distinction.
Absolutely. And once again, we see Joe DeSpirito starting tonight's race. Race number 8 as the Dodge Challenger pulls off into pit road. Green flag will come out. Big checkup mid-pack. Not sure exactly what happened there. Already cars stacked 3 wide. Not sure if maybe somebody missed a gear, possibly blew a gear, but that's going to blow that bottom line wide open. Seth, it looks like DeSpirito at this point down there all by himself.
Yeah, it's about 3 car lengths back to Chuck Mcclure, as now DeSpirito's going to tuck up in front of Seminara, leaving Mcclure and Emery all by their lonesome. You had 5-6 drivers lined up on the top side, and that's where the momentum's going to be, at least early on. But again, let's not forget, Zach, these drivers, yes, we had quite a number of cautions last week, but a lot of it was due to bumper grabbing, where drivers realized if we're going to counter the speed in that middle line, we've literally got to shove the inside line forward.
Absolutely, and something that we've seen on a pretty consistent basis here, that magic number with cars hooking up to be able to shove draft their way to the front seems to be about 3. If you get a 4th car in there that's trying to shove draft the rest of them, that's when those bumper grabs tend to happen. As we see right now, Chuck Mcclure still trying to make that bottom groove work, but he's fallen back to about the 7th position alongside the number 55 Subway car of Tallman.
Now, I want to bring up something here in regards to that 3rd place running driver of Bernie Mobbs. Last season, at this point in time, Joe DeSpirito was pretty well locked in on points. Bob Seminara was a 2-time winner, so he was locked in through wins. And the 2 of them worked together to get Bernie Mobbs a victory to get him into the playoffs. You talked about the fact he's the driver everyone's gunning for here tonight, just inside of the top 10 without a win. obviously, I would think that maybe the 24 and the 712, they've got that same strategy on their mind as we're starting to come down to the end of this regular season.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised a bit to see that happen because if you remember, Mobbs did get that victory, but he ran very stout last season as well. So far, especially the last 2 or 3 weeks now, internet issues have plagued that 90 team as we've not got Sonny Tallman is down on the apron of the racetrack as they bypass him 3 wide. He may be looking to drop to the rear of the pack, but as they're heading into turn 3, he's running out of real estate, Seth.
Undoubtedly trying to drop back there to get with his teammate Dante Ricky, who, classic Dante, usually does not lay down a qualifying lap and works his way from the back to the front in these races. Going to be a little bit longer of a trek for him here tonight, having to pass 38 cars.
Absolutely. Big field. And as you see, all of them storming across, they're storming through the tri-oval down into turn number 1. There's just 3 or 4 stragglers that have maybe kind of lost the back of the draft there. If Perry Bond's not careful in that 60 car, he might be the next to lose the draft, but 2 cars behind him. Right now out front, clean and green, 5-6 cars have broken away in that middle line. The first challenge being up high is going to be Paglia and Grant Wesley into turn number 3.
Yeah, Paglia saw those Dodges coming on the outside line of Mcclure and David Cannon. He's going to jump there and try and help that outside line. Ken Roberts and Jeff Cravello, who were up there helping, they've now bailed out. They've gone down to the inside.
Absolutely. You see these guys, they're just taking their time. Paglia is the one really looking to make moves up there, but he's got some good drafting partners behind him. One of them being the 54 of the Mcclure machine, the other one being the 003 of David Cannon. David Cannon, another one of those drivers who we've seen up front a lot this season, but running up front at the end of these Talladega races a little bit more challenging. We've now got a 3-wide situation down the back straightaway.
That's Cravello stuck in the middle. He's trying to get down maybe in front of Josh Metallic, who he and Tim Knopfsker were trying to get the extreme inside line going in a 2-car tandem. Now they lose ground down the back straightaway. Drivers to focus on here tonight. You touched on, Zach, that with these big fields, it's so easy to lose so many points in the standings, and the points are close for those drivers that are trying to point their way in to this season's postseason battle for the championship. Right now, the drivers we're basically looking at, Cravello, he's 14 points ahead of the cut line along with Donnie Garrett. Chris Emery is only 13 points ahead of the cut line. Jerm Lewis, 9 points ahead. And then the drivers on the outside looking in, you've got Bernie Mobbs -2, Chris Elliott right now -8, and then Richard Martin, Hank Middleton, they're still in the conversation as well as they find themselves currently 14 and 15 points out of 10th place.
Realistically, they've got a shot. They could potentially, even without a whole lot of crashes, with 39 cars on the field, that's still 39 cars battling for various finishing positions. So if everybody survives to the end of the race and they can find themselves up front, they could take advantage of that. Right now, looking as they go into the tri-oval, we've got a battle for the 6th position. That's going to be our first 2 wide. Now, Seth, this is really the first time that we're starting to see the outside making a little bit of time on that middle line as it's now up along the number 38 of Rodney Sullen. So Mark Paglia really making that upper middle line work really well right now.
Yeah, this is kind of what we've been used to seeing the beginning of the season with the 2 lines sharing that middle lane right between those dotted white lines. The thing that we're not seeing, as opposed to last week, are a lot of drivers really down in that inside line trying to move it forward. As we said, a chief reason why we had quite a number of yellows last week. So this says to me that these drivers may have gone back, looked over the tape, realized what was going on, and they're a little hesitant to go down to that inside line now.
Well, we see Josh Metallic and Tim Knopfsker. They're making decent time down there. They've gotten below that 56 Cravello machine once more. Cravello starting to lose touch with that middle line draft just a little bit, and he's got cars on either side of him, so that's going to make it a little difficult to maintain. Paglia now with a big move from the top of the track down to the bottom. He's going to look under the next car in line and even go for Sullins.
Yeah, Paglia, of course, just trying to finish out this season with a win or 2, not points-wise eligible to be able to get up inside of the top 20 in the standings with only 2 races remaining. He's going to hook up with fellow Blue Oval Josh Metallic. Now to their outside is Ken Robertson, the 36, another driver that falls into that category. But this is about the highest we've seen Ken run in a Talladega Challenge field this entire season.
Absolutely. Ken's giving that 55 a good ride there. He's hanging in with that middle line draft just a bit. Now that move down to the bottom didn't pay off for Paglia, Metallic, and Novsker. They have decided to go back up to that middle line behind Roberts. But as we say that now, Metallic looking to the outside middle line of Roberts out of 2.
Yeah, Metallic and Novsker, they've been glued to each other's bumpers pretty much since the drop of the green flag. Wherever the 39 goes, the 088 is sure to follow. Novsker comes into this race tied for 15th in points, so if he were to go to victory lane, even if he didn't point his way into the top 10, he would more than likely be a playoff contender. And this is a driver that was a 2-time winner last season, just didn't run enough races to be up inside the top 20 for those wins to count towards a playoff position.
Well, that just goes to show the level of competition. We've got a car blowing up
wow.
sideways.
We've
got
Dixon?
trouble in the tri-oval. 3, 4, 5, 6 cars involved into the outside wall. One of the engines expired on that machine. The rear end came around, and he came right back up into traffic set.
That's the 143 of Bob Dixon. The engine expiring through the tri-oval. Nowhere for drivers to go. Donnie Garrett and Jim Black amongst those that involved with damage there. The 86, a lot of front-end damage, and that might actually be the end of his race right there.
Absolutely. A lot of hard hits there. Nothing that anybody could do in that situation. Dixon right in the middle of the field leading that lower line, blows up with the car right behind him. Nobody with anywhere to go, and just mayhem ensues. A couple good saves, but I'll tell you what, Seth, those cars that went up into that outside wall went in really hard, and that 86 machine sliding down across the grass. One of the harder contacts that I've seen made with the inside pit wall in a long, long time.
Donnie Garrett, Bobby Farrell amongst those involved. Andrew Miller got a piece of it up into the outside wall, along with the 43 of Richard Martin. And there you see the after effects of the 86 in the inside wall. We'll go back and look at the shot he took down into the pit wall, and maybe one of the worst places for an engine failure to take place, because even if you do have an opportunity to be able to get out of the way, there's not a whole lot of grip down there on the apron through the trial. It's not as easy as it looks to put that car down on that inside line below the yellow line and keep it going straight.
Yeah, there was nothing that Bob Dixon could do there. That was just a really unfortunate situation for himself and everybody else involved in that, as well as you mentioned, coming right down into the tri-oval. And if you clip that apron just a little bit when your car is driving under normal conditions, it's going to want to pop loose. But when you can't put that throttle back down to save it, once it starts to go, that's it. And as you saw the aftermath of that.
Now, the drivers involved in this, that would be the primary focus in terms of potential playoff drivers. You've got Richard Martin, who was 13th in points, involved in that one. Bobby Farrell, 21st in the standings, so he was hovering around 20th position in points if he were to be able to go to victory lane. I also believe that another driver that was collected up in that was the 77 of Donnie Garrett, and he came into this race tied for 6th ahead of the cut line. So depending on how much damage all of those drivers sustained, we'll have to see how it's going to set them up when we eventually get to our regular season finale next week.
Well, Seth, and this just goes to show this is the monster that is Talladega. Now, one of the things that we've documented in the past is drivers like Dante, Ricky, and the like who prefer to start in the back of the field, but you do sometimes at Talladega run into incidents like this where it doesn't matter how far back you start. Once that something like that happens, the track is blocked up, and you just hope that you can make it through there. And unfortunately, those drivers not able to do so. Looking now, you mentioned the 77 of Donnie Garrett caught up in that wreck as well. His car doesn't look to be too torn up. And Seth, we've seen in multiple races in the recent history here where you can get into an accident, your pit crew will come in, or you'll come into your pit crew, they'll get you fixed up, and you can still be a contender at the end of these races.
One driver that will not make it the rest of the way is Jim Black. He indeed went behind the wall. And I'm very interested with this strategy here on the part of Jeremy Jeffrey staying out. Now, he's, I believe, was running around 13th, 14th position when that caution came out. I'm going to assume that this is a strategy call on the part of the 8 machine to counter the bonus point for a lap lead that Joe DeSpirito had, with obviously starting on the pole, because DeSpirito and Jeffries only 16-point separation coming into this race for the regular season championship, which we know translates into a big chunk of bonus points when the playoff grid is put together.
Well, if you think about it, that's a really smart move to make. Now, we do have to be, well, Jeffries rather has to be a little bit worried now that you don't encounter something, trying to come up through the field like we just saw on the racetrack, because realistically, early in the race, great strategy call to try to preserve yourself some points, but hopefully he can have that pan out for him, because we know the tendency to have, 15, 20 car pileups in this race here. So as long as he can keep the nose clean on this car, real smart thing to do.
Go to Spirito is going to re-inherit the lead. He's led 9 of our 12 laps so far. Actually, correction, now make that 11 of our 12 laps so far. Despirito, as we mentioned, the only repeat winner this season, picked up his second victory last week. At this point in time last season, the defending champ didn't have any victories. He had to wait until the playoffs occurred. So definitely, as we've said, he's kind of sending a message that if you're going to take the championship away from him, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to go through him. And he's chasing history here as well. There's, I believe, 3 drivers that have won back-to-back championships. Despirito, the latest of those, but no driver has ever won 3 in a row here in the Tally Challenge.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that we'll talk to him about soon, because we know how much he loves talking about those things with the potential of jinxing himself. Even though, I think it's kind of funny, Seth, whenever he starts getting paranoid about jinxing himself, he ends up going out on the track and proving us wrong and doing it anyway. So I don't think that's too much of a concern for him at this point. As you mentioned, Despirito still in charge of the field. Bob Seminara in the 712. He comes out of the pits. He's going to be sitting in second. Bernie Mobbs, the third of those Florida boys there, still having a really good night tonight, running in the third position. Fourth, the 38 of Rodney Sullins. Sullins giving that car a good run, and we look back to rounding out the top 5, where we find Grant Wesley, our third place point stander right there.
One other driver that will not make it to the finish is Bob Dixon, as we saw the engine expire on his Dodge, so his night is over. He'll finish in 38th, so 37 drivers still running. All 37 on the lead lap. A couple of drivers that came down and topped off the fuel tank. Andrew Miller, Ken Roberts, and Cy Jones. Surprising there about that 055, because we saw Ken up inside of the top 10 when that caution came out. So he lost a lot of track position with coming down pit lane once again. But if we look in terms of what we had last week, that first run relatively calm, and we probably would have gotten to our first round of green flag pit stops if not for the mechanical failure.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all, Seth. I think you're absolutely right on that. Everybody was playing really nice. Nobody was getting too close to each other, giving lots of space. So once we get this race started again, we'll have to see how that plays out, because as we documented, a couple cars that started and were running up toward the front of the pack, now restarting at the tail end of the field. So we'll have to see what sort of progress that they can make and how long it takes them to get back up there again.
Kind of documented drivers around the 10th position in points, drivers that are hovering around 20th position in the standings. But how about drivers that are just outside of the 20th position in points that could go to victory lane? One that jumps out to me is Dante Ricky. Even though he had that second place finish last week, it only moved him up to 22nd in points. It just shows what struggles he's had in those first 6 races. Also, Sonny Tallman, his teammate, David Cannon, who had a runner-up finish a few weeks ago. I mean, these are all drivers that, if they were to win here tonight, could easily move themselves up into the top 20 in the points. So there's like 4 or 5 different scenarios for different drivers here in the field.
Absolutely, and they're not very far out of that 20th place point standing either. You mentioned Dante Ricky, who was a 2-time winner last season, sitting 22nd in points, currently only 5 points outside of that 20th position. So even if he can get himself a good run, hopefully maybe pick up himself a victory this week or next week, he could still hypothetically be in this field. But he's got to keep it clean. Seth, working through the trioval right now. Pace cars on pit road. We're going to be working on to lap number 14. Flagger with the green flag in hand, and these guys are back underway once again, heading it down into turn number 1.
This caution coming out about 5 to 7 laps before these drivers would have had to start thinking about green flag pit stops. So depending on where future cautions fall, could make the pit strategy rather interesting, as Bernie Mobb's going to tuck up in front of Bob Seminara. Seminara trying to stifle the inside line as Grant Wesley trying to find some help. He's got Jeff Cravello there, but half a car length back. Now Rodney Sullivan's going to make it 3 wide. These guys are getting racy now.
And Seth, I don't know if you saw that or not, but the 88 and 712 were touching doors, literally touching doors almost the entire length of that back straightaway. We had Sullins looking up to the high line, and I think he saw what was going on down there and thought a little bit better of it.
Something happened around I think it's the 19th, 20th position there. The field has broken up. There's a huge gap from Chris Elliott back to Hank Middleton. Possibly someone not getting going on that restart. It's not going to take very long, I think, for that second group to reel the top group back in, though, as they are within the draft.
No, I was watching that restart, Seth, and it looked like we saw in the initial start of the race, a car did not get up to speed. Same thing happened there. If it is the car that I believe it is, I think it's the number 2 car of Hank Middleton, probably down a gear, which would have hampered his restart efforts. So back up toward the front of the field, Tim Novsker is working on the inside of Bernie Mobbs on that inside line. No help whatsoever, but that 088 is moving into the tri-oval.
The 24, 7, 12, and 90, they're trying to control the draft. The problem right now, the 24 is having some connection problems. You see him blinking in and out. And what actually happens there is every time that car disappears, that's a little bit of draft that top line is losing. And that's going to help that inside line in their quest to move towards the front.
And that's exactly what Tim Novsker is seeing. The 24 of Despirito still blinking and warping around the racetrack. We've seen the effects of that on races past, but right now Tim Novsker is still trying to get by that 712 car. Looks to be stuck now on the inside of the 616 of Emery.
Yeah, that's Jerm Lewis in that Worth Ford Mustang.
Oh, trouble in turn 4.
Caution's gonna fly as that, I believe, is the 41 of Andrew All. There's a couple of Andrews involved. Andrew Miller in the 47.
I believe the 92 of Bobby Farrell. He was one of the cars that I saw sideways and slam into the outside wall real hard, Seth.
Sonny Tallman in the 55 was collected up in that, and possibly the 7 of Cy Jones. We'll find out about that in a moment as Miller comes down pit road. A lot of left side damage. Looks like the 41 of Andrew All has already made the left-hand turn to the garage area.
Yeah, a couple really hard hits taken there. Didn't see what sparked it off, but we'll have to take it the replay here in just a moment. But as I mentioned, I did see the 92 sideways and then spinning up the racetrack. I have a feeling something had happened prior to that, but not exactly sure what that was. And yeah, a couple cars taking really hard hits in that crash right there, Seth.
A couple more drivers that we didn't realize were involved. The 914 of Gary Hurst. He actually went up and off all 4 wheels for a brief moment. And the car that kind of sparked that wreck, it was a checkup with John Godfrey, Bobby Farrell, and the debuting driver here tonight, Todd Mallory in the 220.
Yeah, it looked like, I'm not even sure if that was bumper grab or just a mistimed bump attempt into the corner, but it did look like the 92 got into the back end of the 711 going into turn number 3. It didn't take a whole lot, but for what happened to it, the 92 lost the rear end, spun back up the racetrack directly into oncoming traffic. So unfortunate to all drivers involved in that one.
Big hit as well for Mike Rogers in the 11 as he got completely sandwiched up into the outside wall. So there's a couple of drivers that sustained pretty significant hits. We'll see if they're going to be able to continue on or not, as it looks like thought that the 41 actually had retired out of the race. They still have him scored in the race. We'll double check on that, as Mike Rogers actually has now officially taken his car back behind the wall. And so far, this is our only caution for a contact wreck. Our other one was a mechanical problem that led to a wreck, and it's around the midway portion of the field, which kind of calls back into question what we were talking about in the case of drivers like Ken Roberts, Dante Ricky, Donnie Garrett, those drivers being towards the rear of the field, having to drive their way through those messes.
Absolutely, and it does get a little bit hairy in those circumstances. That's why I kind of understood what Jeffrey's Jeffrey's strategy was to try to recuperate points and staying out, but that does potentially come at a pretty large cost. Right now, cars that did stay out and did not come into pit that time by were the 222, the 220, and I'll tell you what, Seth, the 220 Todd Mallory debuting here tonight in the Tally Challenge, but that is a sharp race car that he's got out there on the racetrack.
Almost kind of looks like it doesn't belong on a super speedway, kind of like something you see under the lights at your local short track in terms of the number font and everything. Kind of a cool late model look to it.
You know, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because as I'm looking at that car, it reminds me a lot of the old dirt pro stocks that used to run in the central and western New York regions, dirt tracks and the dirt pro stock series. And that paint job just really gives me kind of a throwback to that. Really cool to see there. As you see, he will duck down now onto pit road. Chris Emery, however, opting to not come in and top off the fuel tank like the rest of the leaders did.
Interesting strategy, because if you look at the position of Chris Emery coming into tonight's race, 8th in the point standings, 13 points ahead of 10th in the current points. This is a risky gamble, because if this thing goes long green flag run, he's going to have to come down pit road all by his lonesome. And as we kind of hammer home every single week, if you're going to come to pit road, you have to come with friends.
Absolutely. Once you get back out there on the racetrack, if the entire rest of the field is in a draft and you have no drafting help whatsoever, you're going to run a good second and a half off what the leaders are running, and just no chance to get caught back up. However, we have seen in the past, drivers play this strategy, Seth, and they'll come down by their lonesome, end up going a lap down, but later on in the race, when they get a yellow and get a lucky dog, they find themselves right back up there again. So it's early enough in the race. We haven't quite reached the 1/3 mark of the race yet, as we are now scoring lap number 19 on the boards under yellow flag. So if that is indeed his decision, we'll have to see how it plays out. May not be the worst call.
Andrew All still sits on pit road. Looks like they're trying to see if they can get that 41 repaired, at least enough that he can get back out there onto the racetrack, making his 3rd start of the season, and it's really been a struggle for him. His last 2 finishes, 32nd and 28th, and it looks like he's not going to be faring too well here tonight as well. But, you know, the thing of it is, he's out there getting the experience, and we saw last season a lot of drivers that we now have up inside of our top 10 in points, drivers that have gone to victory lane that are looking like potential playoff contenders. These are guys that we saw mired down 15th through 25th in last season's points.
Absolutely, and I'm not exactly sure what is going on with the All machine, not seeing it sitting on pit road anymore. However, I'm not seeing him being scored anymore either, even though he is being shown 2 laps down. So we'll have to see exactly how that ends up playing out. And until then, it looks like we may have the pace lights off as, oh no, not yet, but as they come across the line this time, Seth, they should be receiving the one to go until green.
All right, so let's rack them up. It's going to be Chris Emery, who stayed out, that will be leading them back to green. Joe DeSpirito, who's led a majority of this race so far, lined up in 2nd. Bob Seminara will be 3rd, with Tim Novsker and Bernie Mobbs completing the top 5. Jerm Lewis, Grant Wesley, Josh Metallic, Jeff Cravello, and Chuck Mcclure. That'll be the top 10. They'll be followed by Mark Paglia, Terry Bombard, Rodney Sullins, Dave Melson, and Glenn Harris. That'll be your top 15. Something I just noticed here, when Joe DeSpirito was leading us to green on the last 2 restarts, the initial start of this race and the first restart, he was able to control getting himself and his teammates lined up. Does having the 222 of Emery bringing us to green throw a bit of a monkey wrench into that?
I think it might throw a bit of a monkey wrench into that, because Emery's starting on the first position on the inside line, DeSpirito starting on the outside line, and then you've got Bob Seminara starting right behind the 222. So unless the 712 lags back just a little bit on the initial restart here, I would think they might have a little bit of trouble getting themselves grouped up, because you know Tim Novsker sitting right behind that 24 car isn't just going to let him go by either. But right now it looks like the 24 dropping to the back of the pack, Seth.
Yep, apparently internet problems are sending him to the rear of the field. Obviously, we know DeSpirito is going to be battling for the championship this season. 2 victories leading the points, but he would have loved to have gone for back-to-back wins and picked up his 3rd win of the season. Now he's going to have to hope that that connection issue settles out at some point here so he can start making forward progress. So everything that we just said there as far as the 712 and the 90 not being able to line up with their teammate, well, their teammate's not there anymore.
No, he is not there anymore. And now Joe DeSpirito, he's going to have to worry about keeping his car clean all the way to the start finish line. However, if there's anybody that can do it, we know it's that 24 DeSpirito. One way or another, he's locked into the playoffs already, so he's not so much worried about points. However, this could be a good opportunity for some guys to gain some points on him. So we'll have to see how it shakes out here as we come back down to the start finish line. The restart will take place on lap number 21, and this kind of reminds me of the old dirt Delaware style restarts, the way that they have them lined up here taking the green side.
Really does. Yeah, the race leader gets the first row all to himself, then they line up behind him. The reason Novsker hung back the way he did was so that way he would not get penalized for passing where the 24 was supposed to restart on the outside of the 222. We'll see if that's going to hinder that outside line too, which has done a great job on these last couple of restarts of forming up on the back straightaway.
Ken Roberts.
Caution.
Yep,
Caution
Ken
is out
Roberts
again.
and the number 55 machine. That engine has expired as well on the restart. Now, there was some contact at the start-finish line about halfway through the field. Not sure if somebody blew a gear, somebody wasn't paying attention to somebody who had blown a gear, but that 55 car is smoking heavily at the bottom of turn number 2, and it's going to come to a rest, and the window net is down, Seth.
Tough break there for Ken Roberts, who had a great qualifying effort here tonight of 16th, had moved his way up as high as 6th place tonight, and now engine woes plaguing him. Second driver to have mechanical problems here this evening, and you gotta wonder now, all these drivers are out there, they have to worry about each other, they have to worry about the track itself. Now they're all wondering, is my engine gonna make it to the end of this race?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a concern and something that they have to take into consideration. So we'll have to keep an eye and see how exactly it all plays out. But you got to think, for a guy like DeSpirito, that might have shaken things up just a little bit. But now he also knows what a hornet's nest that it's been at the back of the pack. A lot of action back there so far tonight, Seth. And very little of it has been due to drivers making errors on the track. It's just been, it seems to this point, pretty circumstantial.
Looked like, just from the spectator view, that it was right with the upshift from second to third gear that the 55's engine went south. We're actually going to go on board with his car and hear the engine. It didn't sound like a common thing that happens where the driver accidentally downshifts here. I don't know, maybe just that the engine might have revved a little too much with the upshift, and that was what caused the engine to blow.
Yeah, or it might just be one of those full moon sort of nights, Seth, where some nights we go weeks without seeing blown engines, and then you'll find those rare races where you'll have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 cars that'll detonate motors. So far, it looks like that might be the case here tonight. It could have been a bit of a shifting issue, but then again, not really entirely sure. Over-revving those engines doesn't typically allow them to blow that easily, but definitely something to be taken into consideration.
Like Chris Emery did come to pit road here. I have to wonder if this is a caution that he wanted to see, because this will at least put him at least close to the same pit window as everybody else who pitted under the last yellow.
Yeah, absolutely. So this will close things up just a little bit. The 24 of DeSpirito, he's also on pit road. He's going to take gas, so that's going to put both him and the 222 on the same pit strategy as well. So those two drivers, at the very least, at least have each other to work with.
So as we can pretty safely assume, Ken Roberts will be in the garage area momentarily. Another driver that actually, I believe, just went to the garage is the 99 of Doug Woolley. Now, we saw on that replay that there was a stack up that took place. Donnie Garrett was in that vicinity, and it was right around where Ken Roberts was when his engine let go, but I didn't see the 99 involved in that, so not certain why he has ended his night early, the driver of that Target Ford Mustang.
I'm not sure exactly what happened there, or maybe it might have just been one of those incidents where the car may have been a little bit off the pace. And knowing as big as this field was, I don't believe Doug Woolley was really in any sort of point contention as far as standings or playoffs are concerned. So he may have just decided to go ahead and call it an early night. So we've had 3 or 4 cautions now in the first 23 laps of the race here, Seth. It's we're not strangers to seeing yellow flags at these super speedways, but 2 or 3 of these incidents now being completely mechanical related.
Yeah, definitely. It's the thing that we always say. Talladega is unpredictable every single week. And as you said, we went a long stretch before we saw a lot of mechanical problems, and now we have it here tonight. And it's kind of interesting that this Russian roulette, if you will, with the engines is happening coming onto the penultimate race of the regular season.
Yeah, well, it's, definitely something it's going to make guys think for sure, especially if you're one of these guys that's in a position to, be a big gainer or potentially a big loser. You don't want to forget about that. So you're constantly watching those gauges, trying to make sure that your temps aren't getting too high, trying every little thing that happens in that race car. You're just kind of sitting, and every little sound's making you a little bit more paranoid. Until you reach the end of the race, you're not going to be totally comfortable, and so you know that you're moving on.
A little bit more than a third of the way through tonight's event to update the drivers that are battling in the bracket series where they're currently running. Bernie Mobbs right now leads his battle. He is third to Jeff Cravello's 7th. And Chuck Mcclure right now is leading his battle. He's in 8th. Jeremy Jeffries right now back in 21st. But again, as I said, only a third of the way through this race. A lot can change up to that point. I want to take a little poll here between the two of us, Zach, because we've already talked about the scenarios for different drivers coming into this race. We've ended up going 7 of these races with only one driver going to victory lane twice, that being Joe DeSpirito. So we've had 6 different winners in the first 7 races. Here tonight, we've got a lot of contenders up here looking for their first win of the season. You've got Nofsker, you got Mobbs, Lewis, Wesley, Cravello, Paglia, Bombard, Sullins going back through the top 10 there. Do we see another first-time winner here tonight clinching themselves a playoff position, or do you see another repeat winner joining Joe DeSpirito?
Well, at the beginning of the season, we talked 4 or 5 races in, Seth, and I said there's no way we will make it this many races without having a repeat winner. We went 6. So, I can't say as my opinion matters a whole lot right now. However, that being said, we see a lot of really fast cars in that top 10 that we know are capable of winning. But right now, Bob Seminaire in the 712 and that number 90 of Bernie Mobbs, they're certainly not going to make it easy for anybody. But if anybody can do it, we know that 00 or that 088 who won a couple times last season, won once this season before being stripped of that victory, is more than capable of doing so.
I might change my mind when we get towards the end of this race, depending who's up at the front. But right now, the odds are certainly in favor of a driver winning their way into the playoffs with their first win of the season. And a lot of them are drivers that went to victory lane last year, like Nofsker, Mobbs, and Wesley. Jerm Lewis and Cravello, they've had consistent seasons. So, all the stars seem to align to make sense for any one of those drivers to go to victory lane here this evening and clinch themselves a playoff position. I believe the only driver right now up inside of our top 10 that cannot clinch a playoff position with a win would be the 28 of Mark Paglia.
Yeah, unfortunately, Paglia missed a few weeks at the beginning of the season with family health issues. He got that taken care of. His wife's doing much better now, which we are much happier to hear. And he's out here running with us again. So, points aside, it's good to have Mark Paglia running with us under good circumstances. And he was one of those guys last season that we saw be able to be really, really, really consistent to make his way into the playoffs. But now with things shaken up a little bit more this season, a couple other drivers having that opportunity, but you know how hungry all of these guys that don't have a win on this season are, namely the 88, the 90, the 088, all guys who know that they can win and have won, but just haven't been able to do it so far in season number 52. Seth, lights out on the pace car as the field works their way back through turns number 3 and 4. drivers pulling their belts tight, getting ready to get going back to racing. We'll be going back green on lap number 26.
Yeah, Bob Seminara does have his wingman Bernie Mobbs behind him, but keep an eye on that outside line because Tim Nofsker and Josh Metallic, they have Germ Lewis in between the two of them, but we saw those two guys get hooked up and move to the front really quickly on that first green flag run. So if they get hooked up again, I'm not certain anybody's going to be able to hold them off and moving up to the top two positions. As through the trial will they come? Bob Seminara for the first time tonight is going to lead them back to the green flag. Waiting on that flagman to wave it as we'll be going back green officially on lap 26. 41 laps to go here tonight at Talladega. Still a long ways to that checkered flag.
Green flag waving at the line. Tim Nofsker with a great start, but in doing so, he gaps himself about a car length and a half from the 616 of Germ Lewis behind him. Bob Seminara down low sees that happening. Now Nofsker losing that momentum up high. It looks like it's going to be Seminara and Mobbs controlling the field off too.
But I think that was important for Nofsker to get that big a jump because it did two things. It stopped Bob Seminara and Bernie Mobbs from jumping up to that outside line, and now contact again there between Nofsker and Seminara. But
trouble!
Nofsker up into the wall. Germ Lewis, this is the big one.
The big one. This is the huge one. Easily half the field involved in this. We saw the 088 and the 712 make contact at the end of the back straightaway. The 088 of Nofsker then slid across down the racetrack, back up again, and Seth, a minimum of 10 to 15 cars involved in this enormous melee in turn number 3.
And Germ Lewis has gotten probably the worst out of all that as his car mangled and smoking out of turn 4. Another of our drivers that was up inside of the top 10 in the point standings trying to secure his playoff position tonight. There is the 088 of Nofsker, and yeah, there must have been upwards of 14, 15 cars collected up in this one because as we usually see at Talladega, if it starts at the front, drivers mid-pack and towards the rear of the field are going to get swept up in it.
I mean, and that couldn't have started any more toward the front. That was literally the front row. And after the 088 slid up into the wall, he came right back down the track again, right around the 6th to 7th positions on the racetrack. And man, I'll tell you what, Germ Lewis definitely collecting the worst of that incident as he came down and got hit hard by multiple cars. I believe his car may have even overturned in between turns number 3 and 4.
I mean, right there, it's just kind of 50-50 on who came up, who came down, because they both did, making that contact heading into turn 3. Mark Paglia, Rodney Sullins, there's Bobby Farrell, Hank Middleton, Glenn Harris, Chris Emery, Jeremy Jeffries gets a piece of it. I think Sonny Tallman's on the right side of our screen there in the 55. There he is down in the infield grass. Driver that did snake his way through was Joe DeSpirito. I think Jeffries didn't get that much contact, but I think we got to have a couple of replays here to fully know all the drivers that got bits and pieces of this wreck. And the one thing I kind of would wonder is why would you make that kind of contact between the 08 and the 712? I know it's to stifle the run of either line, but doesn't it just seem a little too early to be doing that?
Well, it does seem a little aggressive so early in the race, but if you remember about 5-10 laps ago, we saw the 712 and the 88 of Wesley doing the same exact thing down the back straightaway. Fortunately, both of those drivers were able to get out of that. This time, the incident happening between positions number 1 and 2 in turns number 3 just did not work out very well. Seth, I'd be curious to see if we have an onboard, possibly a roof cam from that 616 car, because I'll tell you what, that's going to be one heck of a ride right there.
We'll see if it survived. More drivers that were involved: Billy Elliser, Dave Cannon, Donnie Garrett, Dave Melson, Terry Bombard. It'd probably be a lot easier to name off the drivers that weren't involved rather than the drivers that were. Pretty much if you were running up inside of the top 5, maybe top 7, you got through it. Everybody else on back, you were driving through the smoke, hoping you could get through as we take that on board with Germ Lewis.
Well, Seth, one thing that I can tell you for certain coming out of turn number 4, the only cars that had cleared that entire wreck without incident were the 712, the 90, the 88, the 39, the 56, the 54, the 84, the 10, and the 711. So that's only 9 cars that made it through without any sort of contact. So there's going to be a lot of pit crews really hard at work right now.
We already had 6 drivers back in the garage area after our previous 4 cautions, or 3 cautions, I should say, and this 4th yellow is going to put even more drivers back behind the wall. Already out are the cars of Dave Cannon and Andrew Miller. I would expect the 616 of Jerm Lewis to follow soon. And there's a lot of drivers now that have sustained quite a bit of damage as well. You know, we talked about the fact that this is the race that is going to set up the finale, the regular season finale next week. And a lot of drivers that came into tonight, maybe in not as much of a desperate situation, could be very well now after getting involved in these incidents here in the first 30 laps. Could be heading into the season finale, the regular season finale, in a must-win situation if they're going to battle in the playoffs.
Well, I got to tell you what, Seth, if I'm any one of those drivers that was not those 8 or 9 that we mentioned that was not involved in that wreck there, and I know that I'm in trouble points-wise, I'm panicking. That was the absolute last thing that anybody wanted to see that needed to make up some ground in points. And that was the absolute biggest fear of anybody that was in tight point contention with any of their competitors. So right now, we saw at the conclusion of the last yellow flag, the 8 of Jeffries, the 24 of Despirito come down to top off their tanks. Seth, I think it paid off for him.
It definitely did. Now, the one thing I would question, that little bit of contact that Jeremy Jeffries had with the front end of his race car, how that's going to affect him, but it doesn't look visibly like it's too bad. It was just a little bit of a tap. Joe Despirito was able to make his way through safely as well. And it looks like, at least for the moment, hoping I'm not jinxing it, that the connection issues for Despirito have settled out as well. So circumstances definitely working out for both of those drivers. And don't forget that Jeremy Jeffries is one of those 4 drivers that's in the semifinals for the challenge, or for the bracket series as well.
Absolutely. So you know that he's looking to put himself together a good run here tonight. We know that he's got a lot on the line coming into the regular season point standings. He came in 16 points behind trailing point leader Joe Despirito, but right now his eyes in the mirror at that 54 of Chuck Mcclure, because as far as the bracket standings are concerned, it's whichever of those 2 drivers finishes ahead of the other tonight that will advance to the final round of the bracket series, Seth. So we know those guys trying to keep track of each other out on the racetrack.
You know, it's kind of interesting, too. We weren't necessarily aware that the bracket series was going on until this evening and found out that we're now in the semifinals. But a driver that pulled off an upset this season that definitely deserves the accolade for it here on the broadcast would be Wiley Coate, because a lot of people would fully expect Joe Despirito to have been one of the names that we would have had in our final 4 for the winner's bracket. But Wiley Coate pulled off a 32-1 upset back in the first round. So credit to him being able to topple not only the defending champ, but the defending winner of the bracket series from last season.
Absolutely, and that's a feat in and of itself. Of course, we mentioned the one bracket battle between Jeffries and Mcclure. The other one that we have ongoing tonight between the 90 and the 56, Bernie Mobbs and Jeff Cravello. Now, Seth, we kind of documented it a little bit at the beginning of the broadcast, as well as when talking with Jeff Cravello. These 2 guys also going to have to keep a close eye on each other, and we know both of them have been running really, really well this season.
Yeah, and I just have to chuckle because it's as if you didn't have to have one more thing to think about. Not only are you trying to focus to get yourself into the playoffs, try and win this race, but oh yeah, you got to keep tabs on where the driver you're battling in the bracket series is on track in comparison to you as well.
Absolutely. So for Mobbs, you know, that's definitely a concern at this point. He came into tonight's race 2 points outside of the top 10. So as far as he's concerned, he is not yet in, but so far running in that 3rd position, could be in a very good spot to bring home a lot of points and get himself into that top 10 in points. And of course, we documented at the beginning of the race, Jeff Cravello came in tied for 6th in points, 43 points out of lead. Cravello also having a great season this year. So Seth, pace cars going to duck down onto pit road as these cars work their way into the tri-oval lap 31 at the green. We're going to try it all over again.
We are indeed. Jeffries and Despirito going to be the front row. A couple of former winners from this season. Then you've got Mobbs and Wesley looking for their first trip to victory lane. Then a couple more former winners behind them in row 3 with Metallic and Chuck Mcclure as Jeffries up through the gears. Going to lead us back to green. Lap 30 complete. 31 on the board.
Big jump for the 8 of Jeffries, but as you see the 88 of Wesley, he's giving no quarter to that 24 car, all over that bumper, heading off into turn number 1. So now it's going to be the Florida boys side by side for second off of turn number 2.
Jeffries going to jump up to that outside line, pull the 24 to his back bumper. Wesley helping to push as well. Inside line going nowhere fast. Bernie Mobbs has now dropped to a battle for third. Might be a battle for fourth when we get out at turn 4 because the momentum right now on that top side.
And just as we say that, Mobbs powers his way up to the inside of the 24 to Spirito. We'll have to see if the 39 can get back to the bumper of the 90 in the tri-oval. He will not. He will fall back alongside the 88 of Wesley. Out of the tri-oval, Jeremy Jeffries, Joe DeSpirito, and a side-by-side between Wesley and Mobbs into turn number 1.
Now, at this point in time, heading into the finale, one driver does have the potentiality, despite the big fields we've had week after week, to lock himself into the playoff on points. That is the 88 of Grant Wesley. Right now, he is plus 31 ahead of 10th in the standings. If he can at least finish in the top 5 here tonight, he may be heading into the regular season finale next week worry-free, knowing he is going to at least point his way into a postseason slot.
Whether or not he can lock himself in tonight, we know the one thing that he wants for season number 52 is a regular season victory. Hasn't been able to pull it off. I believe he was a 3-time winner last season. Not able to find victory lane so far this year. A very up and down year as it has been for many of the competitors. But Wesley finding himself just 21 points, trailing Joe DeSpirito, and just 5 points behind Jeremy Jeffries in that 8 car, leading the field off of turn number 2.
How about this for a little bit of irony? Last week, Dante Ricky filled in the 54 of Robbie Nices to a second-place finish. He now rides in 5th, pushing the 54, being driven this week by Chuck Mcclure.
And Mcclure is one of those guys who already has one of those victories. He's got himself locked into the playoffs after going season 51 winless. Dante Ricky, on the other hand, in the 84, he bookended the regular season in season number 51, has not been able to find himself in victory lane. But we see right now both those drivers having really strong runs. You look back behind him, you've got the number 9 of Chris Elliott in that Cheetos machine. And just behind that, you find our first side-by-side, Mobbs in the 43 of Richard Martin, who after sustaining damage earlier in the race has bounced back quite nicely.
Talladega. Whoa! Perry Bond up the track off the nose of Dave Melson. He keeps it straight. That was a close incident off of turn 2, but we have officially now heard that the 616 of Jerm Lewis has gone to the garage area, finishing in 31st. That's a driver, folks, that came in inside of the top 10, 9 points ahead of the cut line.
Absolutely. So with that, very likely the 616 going to fall out of the top 10. That's going to create some urgency for that team next week. Right now, leaders single file through about the first 15 or 20 cars down into turn 1. It's not until you get a little... Oh, we had some contact between the 55 of Tallman and the 222 of Emery. Emery with a great save as he was absolutely sideways sailing it off into turn number 1.
Backing everyone up from about the 18th position on back, and with the departure of the 616, now this kind of throws into question who's going to move into the top 10 to take his slot. Right now, the 2 drivers that would be the contenders for that spot in the top 10, Chris Elliott in the 9, running currently in the 6th position. Bernie Mobbs behind him in 8th place. Those 2 drivers were on the outside looking in.
Absolutely. And don't forget Chris Elliott in the number 9 car. He was actually our point leader earlier this season. Then he found himself in a little bit of bad luck. But as again, you can see tonight in race number 8, putting together a great effort as he rides in the 6th position behind the 84 of Ricky.
I don't know what it is this season, but it almost seems like Dodge has had a renaissance as well, because right now we've got 4 of them running up inside of the top 10, the 54, the 943, and the 90.
Yep, and those boys making those Dodges look real sporty. that Dodge pace car sitting at the end of pit road is saying, hey, that's my brand out there on the racetrack, and they're doing damn good, as those three really are right now, putting together really good runs. We usually see the Doritos and Cheetos machines running right up front together, but those Dorito cars have gotten a little bit crunched up tonight. So Cheetos, the only one brand still standing strong. Lap 30 of 7 across the line. Jeremy Jeffries still your leader with Joe DeSpirito in tow into turn 1.
Single file from the race leader all the way back to around the 16th position before you find Bill Elliser and Dave Melson side by side. Is this drivers just kind of deciding, all right, we know we're going to at least have another pit stop before this race is over. Let's just settle down a little bit here, because a lot of times drivers, a big one, can actually scare drivers back into their senses.
Well, I think it's a bit of a combination between that, Seth, and the fact that there are so many damaged cars that are out there on the racetrack at this time. Objectively speaking, if you look at the top 10, there's at least 3 or 4 of those cars that were involved in that big melee there in turn number 3, our last yellow flag. So a lot of guys probably just not able to quite make the runs that they want to at this point either. And when that happens, you get those fast, undamaged cars out front. It's hard to find a good lead car that can really work its way up through the pack. So I think it might be a little bit of both. Drivers being a little bit careful and some drivers not being able to get quite what they want out of the race cars at this point in the race.
2 drivers that made the contact, the side-by-side contact into turn 3 that led to that big wreck, bringing out our 4th caution. Bob Seminara and Tim Nofsker trying to make forward progress. Seminara going down all by his lonesome to that inside line. No friends for the 712, as right now he is in the 11th position trying to crack the top 10. Nofsker not quite as lucky. He does have some front-end damage to deal with. It is hindering his speed. He's only been able to work his way now up unofficially to the 21st position.
And just as you said that, Seth, the 39 darted out in front of the 712 there to the inside line. The 712, however, wasn't able to maintain the same momentum that the 39 does. He's going to give Metallic a big shove down the back straightaway, but that's only going to get Metallic alongside the 56 cars. Those 2 cars right now on an island heading down into turn number 3.
They're going to need more friends, and maybe if drivers see that inside line coming, they'll move down. Bernie Mobb's going to do just that, as he'll now move to the inside of Richard Martin for 7th place, trying to tow the 39 and 712 with him. And now these guys are starting to see that the racing's taking place just in the latter half of the top 10. 3rd line forming with Dave Melson and Hank Middleton.
That line quickly falls apart. Again, those 2 cars heavily damaged in wrecks earlier in the day. Right now, the bottom line being led by Bernie Mobbs, help from Josh Metallic and the 712 of Bob Seminara. But their problem right now is there are only 3 cars and they're battling for about the 9th position. No drafting help in front of them, no help coming from behind. If this keeps up, I have a feeling, Seth, they're going to probably be falling to the back of this draft relatively quickly.
Yeah, so far they've made a little bit of progress, but not much. Now add Hank Middleton to their cause in that inside line, but it only gets Bernie Mobbs up alongside of Jeff Cravello for the 8th position. They're going to need more numbers down there if they're going to make that forward progress. And one thing I'm noticing here, if you watch them to the start-finish line, little bit of daylight between the front bumper of Josh Metallic and the rear bumper of Bernie Mobbs. If this were last week, you would have seen no daylight. You wouldn't have been able to fit a sheet of paper between their bumpers.
You wouldn't have been able to fit a sheet of paper between their bumpers, but at the same time... Oh, trouble off of turn number 2. The 2 of Middleton gets turned. He comes up the track. Again, 5-6 cars involved in this off of turn number 2. A wad of cars piled up hard on the inside of the racetrack on the backstretch.
Sonny Tallman and Donnie Garrett involved. I believe it might have been Middleton and Melson that got together. Nofsker was sliding through the apron on the back straightaway. He may have been able to get through, but Mark Paglia did not. A lot of rear-end damage on that motorcraft Ford, as caution is going to fly for the 5th time here tonight at Talladega.
Almost an uncharacteristically high amount of cautions here at Talladega, 2 of which we know were caused by mechanical failure. However, This one, not so much. Looked like guys getting a little racy off that second corner, and guys just kind of running out of room. I'm not sure if somebody might have come off the back bumper of somebody else, but I saw the 2 car get turned sideways, and the chain reaction that ensued from that was 4 or 5 cars automatically. It looked like the 088 of Novsker and the 28 of Paglia hard impacts to that inside wall.
Hard for me to tell at first glance there. The car that snapped out of shape was the 038 of Rodney Sullins. He came down and got Hank Middleton, who then in turn came up and got Dave Melson. The car that was behind Sullins was the 55 of Sonny Tallman. I don't know if there was contact that took place between those two that might have hooked that 038 around.
Yeah, I think if you take a quick look at the spectator cam coming off of turn number 2, Seth, you're going to see the 55 was all up inside the bumper of that 38 car, probably lifted the rear end tires right off the ground, and that's when we saw all hell break loose on the back straightaway. So even more cars, even worse off than what they were before. And if you're some of these guys that were kind of worried about points, you see the 77 was involved in it again. Again, as we mentioned, the 088 of Novsker, guys that really needed to be able to capitalize on good runs, finding some really hard luck here tonight.
At least the second incident by my count that Donnie Garrett has been involved in, as we're going to take a look at that shot that Mark Paglia and Tim Novsker took. Another driver that got a piece of the incident was the 220 of Todd Mallory. And there may have been a couple of others as well getting bits and pieces. There is the shot right there. Novsker had that wreck completely cleared, but when the 28 got hooked, wrong place, wrong time for Novsker.
Absolutely. You saw his car make hard contact with that inside wall on the backstretch. Actually got airborne, almost went up and over. However, it did settle itself back down. The team for the 088 has done as best a job they can at repairing that car. But Seth, after being already pretty badly damaged in our last caution, I can't imagine that's going to help the 088 very much at all.
No, I mean, his car looked like it still had enough speed to stay up with the lead group, but as we documented, he just was not making the forward progress that we saw him do earlier when he was working with Josh Metallic at the start of this race, going to ride on board with the Pabst Blue Ribbon Chevrolet to see what he saw. Had the wreck missed right there, and then here's where the 28 is going to come flying in. It looks like the contact for the most part was to the left rear. So he may be at a status quo of where he was speed-wise, but to your point, extra damage is not going to help that car at all.
No, absolutely not. And Paglia, who we had documented as having a pretty good run a little bit earlier in the race, the team has gone to work on the back end of that car as well. No rear bumper cover whatsoever, so we know that car probably just about as good as done, as it's not going to be very effective in the draft, and I would have to imagine probably not up to speed either.
Grant Wesley is going to lead his first laps of the evening as his team got it done on pit road, and he is going to be your race leader when we go back green with what's going to be in the vicinity of about maybe 20 laps to go, maybe a little more than that. As we mentioned, Wesley's had a very consistent season. It's just been victory lane that's eluded him.
Absolutely. And again, as we documented earlier, Wesley found much success throughout last season, eventually making it to the Final Four in the playoffs. But we're going to have to keep an eye on how this plays out, because I think there's going to be 21 laps to go about when we go back to green, Seth. And we know these guys can only make 19, 20 laps around under green flag conditions. However, we know if there's one guy that can stretch his fuel out even farther than the rest, especially if it's under yellow flag, it is that leader in the number 88.
Absolutely, going back to last year where he was able to clutch under the final pacing laps to pick up a victory. And I think these drivers realize the situation as well. Saw the 24 clutching there through the center of 1 and 2. You got Mcclure down the apron. He's clutching. So these drivers realize that if this thing does go green to the end, it is going to be very close into who's maybe even going to just have the fumes to get back around for the checkered flag.
Yep, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit, Seth. When you are these lead cars, you're breaking through all that air, creating that giant vacuum for the cars behind you. However, that can puts you at about a 2 to 3 lap disadvantage on fuel to compare to, the cars that are running between the 10th on back positions. So these guys really having to save as absolute much as they can right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they might swing down into pit road to top off their tank this time by.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that, see if there are any late pitters to come down and make absolutely sure that they could make it to the conclusion of this race. Certainly a lot of those guys back there would not lose out on track position. See if anybody who would be the first taker to come down and try and top off that fuel tank. McClure's down the apron, but I don't think he's coming down pit road. No, he's going to stay out there in third place. We should be getting the 1 to green signal this time, and let's see if any takers are coming down. Maybe a couple here from around 15th on back. Yep, Novsker's coming in. Wayne Pribnow's coming in. Dave Melson. These are the guys that are banking on it going green to the finish, and this could be a race-winning call on their part.
They could very well be, and we know the 088 is a little bit off the pace as well as a couple other cars back there. However, if you get yourself into a position where hypothetically this race were to go green for the final 21 laps, not only are those guys going to save fuel by being in the draft, but those lead cars ahead of them are absolutely going to have to come into pit if it were to go green. So we'll have to see exactly how it plays out. We know a couple of those cars off the pace, but as long as they can maintain that draft, they could find themselves, hypothetically in a position to maybe be spoiler at the end of the day.
Well, classic Dante Ricky started at the rear of the field, started 37th here tonight, finds himself up in 4th, but I want to go back to something that we heard from him last week when we interviewed him after his second place finish, and he said these final 2 races, the position he's in points, he has to approach these 2 races as a must-win situation. Now, if you've got good starting track position at a 1.5 miles or a short track, it's an easy enough feat. You have a little bit more confidence, but at a super speedway where it's so unpredictable, how do you get yourself mentally in that frame of mind to be able to formulate a strategy in a must-win situation?
Well, I think what you have to do in that case, Seth, after some of the super speedways that I have run in my career, is you just have to put yourself in a spot in your head where you kind of play out best case scenarios, because there are so many different variables and factors, especially in super speedway racing, that could take you out of contention. You can only control yourself and your car and what is going on in the moment when you're driving behind the wheel. So you plan for best case scenario and hope you don't come on the butt end of worst case scenario.
I think Donnie Garrett kind of said it best. If you're in the top 5 them to death mentality, if you're up there in the top 5 in the closing stage, you got a shot at winning this race. So if you have at least the goal of being up there in the top 5, then you've got a shot at the victory, and you can start formulating that plan when you get into those final 5 laps or so.
Yep, so I think that's what a lot of these drivers are probably going to be doing here. Dodge Challenger pace car down pit road once again. Green flag in the flagger's hand. The field will get restarted here on lap number 46. 21 laps remaining. It's Wesley and Despirito side by side down into turn number 1.
A little squirrely back there was Wiley Coate in the 6, but everyone keeps it straight into turn 1. Wesley going to try and clear the 24. Does he move up off the second corner? Indeed he does, leaving Chuck Mcclure and Jeremy Jeffries to try and get the inside line going.
And right now, that's about as tight as we've seen that bottom line run in the last couple runs now. The 54 of Mcclure making a serious effort at the lead going down into turn number 3, but he will fall back just a little bit to side by side with the 24 of Despirito, kind of working his way right up to the left rear quarter panel of Wesley off 4.
We'll see if they can keep the momentum down here into the tri-oval. On the straightaways is where that middle line gets us momentum. Into the corners is where the inside line is able to battle back. Wesley is going to clear both lanes for the top position, and now in the 88, going to have to use the Dale Jr.-like fashion of controlling both lines.
Well, and we saw Sonny Tallman do that with great success last week. Not something that we typically see here with the RTG Tally Challenge Series, but we know it can be done. We saw it be done. But right now, Grant Leslie looking very comfortable. The 24 of Joe Despirito all over the back bumper of that 88 Mountain Dew Chevy or Gatorade Chevy off into turn number 3.
Top 3 now all clear as Dante Ricky, well, he did have the 54 cleared in turn 3. Now it's going to be Mcclure battling back. Now Ricky's going to officially clear and leave them battling for 4th place between the 54 and the 90. And a couple of drivers that we haven't really talked about in the first half of this race starting to enter into the conversation. How about former winner Billy Elliser? I see the 7-Eleven of John Godfrey back there. Remember the underdog story we had in last year's season finale when he went to victory lane?
Yep, these guys all very capable of winning races, and the driver that I'm looking at right now, Seth, is the driver that just got by the Mcclure machine for the 5th position. Richard Martin putting together a solid effort tonight, and he's got a lot of help behind him in the form of that 712 of Seminara.
Talked about the fact that if this thing went green to the end, all these drivers would probably have to be on pit road. Of those that topped off the fuel tank, the highest running of them right now is the 9 of Chris Elliott. He's been able to work his way currently inside of the top 20 in the 17th position. So there's kind of 2 battles going on right now. These drivers up here at the front, they're battling for the race lead to see who may be the one to lead them down pit road for their final stop. Further back, it's the drivers that might be good on fuel trying to figure out where they are in relation to the others that came to pit road with them.
Yep, and right now those drivers that did top off are just kind of taking it easy with the exception of the 9 of Elliott and just kind of cruising around the back of the pack. And Seth, that's all that they really need to do right now to try to save a little bit of gas to make it to the end, because we know right now Wesley, Despirito, Dante, Ricky, those 3 drivers not able to save anything one way or another unless a caution comes out. These guys are absolutely going to have to pit before the conclusion of this race.
Right on the inside line, 3 former winners, Metallic, Mcclure, and Jeffries. And let's not forget that these guys, even though they're already locked into the playoffs, their goal is to finish the highest in the point standings as well, because dependent on where you are at regular season's end in points determines how many bonus points you're going to get when the playoff standings are reformatted.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that kind of makes us think about the bracket series once again. We know it was Chuck Mcclure and Jeremy Jeffries duking it out. Right now, those 2 drivers nose to tail behind the 39 Metallic machine. Metallic now going to take his shot at trying to lead that low line.
Donnie Garrett with his hands full as he almost got into the left rear quarter panel of Wiley Coate. That was a near wreck off in turn 3. They were able to settle it out, though. Nice job by everybody to allow both the 6 and the 77 to gather it back up.
A lot of really good heads-up driving there with all the big wrecks we've seen today. It was good to see those guys be able to gather it back up and get it back in order. Right now, the 39 machine of Metallic, he's working to the inside of Richard Martin. Seth, that bottom line starting to finally make a little bit of progress.
Josh Metallic was the driver this season that got to breathe the earliest sigh of relief, winning the season opener, knowing he was going to be battling for the playoffs. At one point this season, he actually did fall outside of the top 10 in the point standings, however, and finds himself 15th. So that's a driver that we know is going to make it into the playoff grid, but may not have a lot of bonus points coming his way. If he got a second victory, though, that would help him to be able to counter bonus points he might lose.
A second victory would be huge, but as long as he can keep himself in that top 20, we also know how big a win in the playoffs is. So as long as he can get to that first round of the playoffs, that 39 definitely still in contention. He's gotten by that 43 of Martin. He's alongside the 90 of Mobs now, trying to work up to the inside of the 84 of Dante Ricky. Seth, what I'm seeing, that bottom line loses just a little bit of ground on the straightaways, but what they're gaining through the corners is beating that middle line right now.
You know what else I just saw? That 43 of Richard Martin. You saw the gap between himself and Bernie Mobs kind of open up. The 43 clutched it into turn 1 on that last lap. I'm hearing that these drivers are anywhere from a half to maybe a full lap short of making it on fuel.
And I'll tell you what, to be in the position of that 43, especially with the 712 right behind you, you're running in that 5th place position, clutching it even just a little bit into these corners. That could cause some big issues and accordion effects for the drivers behind you. I'm not sure if between now and the remaining 13 and a half laps that we have left, that little bit of clutching is going to do any more good than what it's actually going to do harm for the cars behind you.
And with the scenario of these drivers being short on fuel, you know, the one guy that doesn't like that scenario is the 88 of Grant Wesley. As you touched on, you're that lead car, you have to keep it wide open, and you're cutting the draft for everyone else behind you, consuming the most fuel. So if it is that big question mark for all these drivers, the one driver we know for absolute certain that wouldn't be able to make it would be Grant.
Yeah, it's going to be Grant, and I wouldn't be surprised if the 24 and the 84 were in the same position, because with the exception of going across the start-finish line that time by, these three cars, the 88, 24, and 84, have been absolutely hooked up bumper to bumper all the way down these straightaways. A couple times I've seen out of turn 4, Dante Ricky timed the bump perfectly on the 24 of Despirito and just shoot those cars off into the tri-oval, and it's showing out on the racetrack right now.
But as you recounted last season when Grant Wesley pulled off a fuel strategy miracle, if we ended up having a caution come out past the completion of lap 62, race would end under yellow. I don't know, a half to a full lap short. I would think that these drivers would be able to save enough under pacing, including our race leader Grant Wesley, to make it around to the checkered flag. So I think he's hoping for lightning to strike twice here as it did last season.
Absolutely. That's definitely got to be on his mind right now as we see those cars a moment ago. A scary few seconds there for the 24 of Despirito as he started blinking and warping across the track. I was concerned he might get into the back end of the 88 of Wesley. He avoided doing so. Now down into turn number 3, the 84 of Ricky and Bernie Mobbs looking to make a run at the 88 and 24.
Let's see what Dante Ricky can do as he'll get alongside of Grant Wesley. Right now, pretty even numbers on the bottom and outside line, which means the outside line should get the slight advantage on these straightaways, but look at the momentum. The 84 got through the tri-oval. That's usually an area of the track where the outside line gets the advantage.
Yeah, that is. And what I saw out of that 84 is he's got a really stout car right now. That 24 still wiggling just a little bit. That doesn't give any confidence to Wesley or the 43 of Martin behind him. So without those front two on the middle line being able to bump draft as efficiently, that's going to give a huge advantage to this bottom line as we see now. Mobbs pushing Ricky huge off into turn number 3.
26 drivers, all less than a second separation in this lead pack. We got about 4 drivers that have fallen off of the grid with these lead group, but they're out there logging laps, trying to stay on the lead lap in case something happens up here, and an opportunity to be able to swoop in, get a couple more positions and a couple more points. Ricky is going to lead that lap by about half a car length over Grant Wesley as we close in to the 10 laps to go marker.
And as you mentioned, Seth, that time by, there are 10 laps to go. That bottom line looking as strong as it has all night long. Dante Ricky, Bernie Mobbs working that line masterfully. But right now it looks like Despirito's issues. His internet connection has leveled itself back out, and he will push the 88 of Grant Wesley out to the advantage off into 3 and 4.
Right now, Dante Ricky, Bernie Mobbs, Richard Martin up inside of these first 3 rows, along with Grant Wesley, are all looking to win their way into the playoffs. If any of them won here tonight, it would more than likely confirm them a spot in the postseason. And right now, 2 of them side by side, close at the line that time. I think the 88 might have won that exchange.
And I'll tell you what's not helping that middle line right now as I'm watching the bottom line in comparison to the middle line. The first 3 cars on the bottom line, Ricky, Mobbs, Metallic, all absolutely hooked up bumper to bumper. But if you look up to that middle line, the 43 of Martin not quite getting to the back bumper of the 24 the same way as that inside line is doing. Martin able to be able to do that about halfway down the back straightaway. But as you can see, a much more sizable gap between the 24 and 43 than what there is the 90 and the 39 off of 4.
Yeah, under normal circumstances, lined up nose to tail, Grant Wesley should have Dante Ricky cleared by half a car length going into turn 3. He's just barely alongside him when they get to the 3rd corner, as again, Dante gets a great push through the trial. That time, no contest. The 84 is going to lead that lap. We're getting closer to that lap 62 mark. Now, these drivers, for the past few weeks, have been really good in ending this race under green flag conditions, but when we start coming down to the end of the regular season, into the semifinals of the bracket series, a chance to be in the playoffs, we know push is going to come to shove. You just kind of get the feeling that streak's going to come to an end sooner or later.
I really think you're right there, Seth, but what's more interesting right now to me, coming by the line, there will be 7 laps to go, and of these top 5 cars, I think maybe the 39 of Metallic, maybe, I put an emphasis, might be the only one who might be able to make it back under green flag racing conditions. So we know these guys, that fuel strategy, that's got to be at the forefront of their mind right now. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be really dicey if these guys have to come into the pits, because they are very vehemently side by side all the way throughout the field.
It would be the only time tonight that they would be able to make a green flag pit stop, and for some of them, it could be the most important green flag pit stop of their entire season. Yes, there is one more race to go next week, but it could be the moves you make here tonight that could determine what position you're in to go in next week. And Richard Martin up and into the wall. Wiley Coat gets him. We're racing back to the caution. We will go back green. That throws all the fuel strategy out the window.
Fuel strategy out the window through the tri-oval right now. Still Ricky with the advantage. Mobs behind him. The 88 of Wesley not able to get that run across the line. It's going to be Ricky, Mobs, Wesley, Metallic, and Despirito. This incident after the 54 drifted up just a little bit into the left rear of the 43 of Richard Martin in turns number 3 and 4, collecting the 6, and the 6 spinning back down the track and collecting many more cars. Big wreck. That's been the story of the night, Seth. Big wrecks.
Definitely has. Richard Martin had a great run last week, jumped from 17th to 13th in points, had a shot to point his way into the top 10 here tonight. We'll go back and see what happened, but Zach, it's decision time now for these race leaders. Do you come down pit road and have the absolute guarantee that you can make it the rest of the way, or do you save here under pacing, hope that you can save that half lap to lap that you would be short and keep your track position?
Well, I think if we look at the top 5 right now, they're answering it for us, Seth. All 5 of those cars, not a single one of them at this moment with their engines running, all totally clutching. I would think if they were planning on coming in this time by, they wouldn't even be worried about clutching right now. But now it looks like your top 6 all over the clutch. And as they come down here by pit road, doesn't look like any of these drivers going to come down for fuel. They're going to try to stretch it.
This is going to get really interesting, and I noticed that Grant Wesley crossed the line, I think it was 3rd or 4th, when they raced back to the caution. The reason for that is he actually got onto the clutch before they even got to the start-finish. Remember, he led a good portion of that last run, so he would be shorter on fuel than probably most of the other drivers in the field.
Absolutely. So we'll have to see exactly how that does play out for him. It'll be interesting in seeing how it plays out for the entirety of the top 5 or 6, to be completely honest with you. But, you know, the 88 of Wesley trying to save just a little bit more, but for the amount of time that he was leading the field there, Seth, I don't know if those results are even going to matter for much. I would think they'll be negligible at most.
Just heard it was rather vague, but these drivers are still going to be close on fuel. No numbers were given out, so we're going to have to wait and see here how many laps we're going to have left and just how much these drivers are going to have in the tank, as Dante Ricky last week got his, I believe it's his second place finish on the season. This is a driver who started and ended last year's regular season with trips to victory lane, still chasing his first one here this season. But based off what we saw last week, you kind of got the feeling Dante was going to be forced to reckon with here tonight.
Absolutely, and he's making his name known. So, Seth, my train of thought, I think we're going to have about a 2-lap restart here. Had this been a single-lap restart, I think these guys would have been okay, but I think this is going to put us in a really interesting situation, and I'm going to be honest with you, Seth, I don't think all of these leaders are going to make it back under green, so unless there's a real quick yellow on this restart, these guys are going to have what they have once they come back to green flag racing.
Like, of the drivers that had come down pit road under the last caution, that Chris Elliott had been the one to make the most forward progress up to 12th place. See if he's going to be able to make it on fuel or not. Still a big question mark on the rest of these top 11. And in terms of the drivers that were involved in that wreck, Wiley Coate came into this race outside of the top 20 in points, as did Bobby Farrell. They would have had to win to not only put themselves in the playoffs, but to move into the top 20 in points as well. And the 43 of Richard Martin, as we've already documented, came into this race 14 points behind the cutoff line of 10th in the standings, 13th overall in points. So another driver that more than likely next week is going to fall into the category of must win.
Absolutely. So we'll have to see how this goes. Right now, 4 laps remaining as we remain under green. All of your leaders up at the front of the pack. Cars completely silent, as we've talked about, Seth. The big story right now, fuel mileage. Fuel mileage and how it's going to affect the outcome of the race. Now, we have a number of drivers that have been swept up in incidents throughout the course of the day, and a number of drivers that are also looking to take advantage of that fact. So we'll have to see what happens, but I don't know, Seth. I keep saying it, and I understand I keep saying it over and over and over again. I do not believe these leaders, once we go back to green flag racing, are going to have enough to make it back to the start finish line, and that could cause at least one more big incident out here on the track before all is said and done.
All right, so let's say that you're correct, and these drivers start running out of fuel going into, let's say, maybe on the back straightaway, turn 3 on the final lap. What can you do to avoid that situation here if we do indeed have only 2 laps to go?
Pray that you can find a clean line, because I think if it does happen the way that I think it's going to happen, and I could be absolutely wrong in my thinking of this, but I don't think it's going to be just one car. Now, will they all run out at the same exact spot on the racetrack? No, I highly doubt that that's what's going to happen, but I would be willing to gamble at least 1 or 2 of our current top 5 or 6 are not going to make it back to this checkered flag, and it's not because they're going to be caught up in an incident, unless they are, which, we can't rule that out toward the end of the race either, but unless there's another quick yellow, I just don't see these guys making it back. I don't see it happening. I don't know how they could, because before we went back to green, there was 21 or 22 laps to go, and none of those leaders came in on those final laps to top off. So we know how quick these guys run through fuel. We'll have to see what happens.
And you got to also consider the fact that if there are drivers in the field that can make it on fuel, they've got to be aware of the drivers that are close, because we could kind of liken it to the mechanical problems we saw here tonight earlier on. The driver that's behind the driver that has their engine expire, there's no warning for either driver, and next thing you know, you're into the back of that car that's quickly losing speed. If there's a driver that is pushing another machine that's running out of fuel, there's no warning for that driver behind, and it could end up leading to that particular driver getting caught up into a wreck when they could actually make it back on fuel to the start-finish line.
Absolutely, and you can scream over the radio and or team speak, I'm out of gas, I'm out of gas, I'm out of gas, but those cars behind you aren't going to be able to slow up at the rate at which your car is slowing once you run out of fuel. So the pace lights are out atop the pace car. So Seth, it is going to be a 2-lap shootout out to the end here, and we'll have to see if these guys can make it to the end, because by our calculations, it's like you said, back to the 12th place position before we get to the first car that we know for sure is going to have enough gas to make it to the end.
As if the fuel mileage isn't enough, a lot of different scenarios could play out here. Dante, Ricky, Bernie, Mobbs, they could lock themselves up playoff spots with a victory tonight. Same for Grant Wesley. Metallic and Despirito are already in, along with Mcclure and Seminara. You've got Cravello back there, who not only could win his way in, but maybe have himself in a position to point his way in next week with a decent run. Terry Bombard, he's out here just to win. He can't make the playoffs. And Donnie Garrett, after being involved in 2 incidents here tonight, he's up there inside of the top 10. He's had to make a couple of comebacks here tonight. he could maybe be one of the few guys up inside the top 10 that absolutely can make it on fuel with the number of times he's been to pit road.
And how big would that be for the 77 of Garrett? We know how badly he's wanted to get into the victory lane the last season and a half or two. Hasn't been able to do so. But Seth, I'm looking at the points as they run right now, and that tie for 6th in points, Jeff Cravello, number 56. Mathematically speaking, if he can eke out a couple more positions here before the end of the race, he could potentially lock himself in prematurely to the playoffs.
Who's got enough gas in the tank? It's a green-white checker to finish out tonight's race at Talladega. Dante up through the gears, going to get the early advantage into turn number 1. Wesley going to help push him there. We'll see if Dante stays low or moves up to that middle line once he's pushed clear. He's going to have to hope he's got enough fuel because he's going to more than likely be the leader coming to the white flag.
Absolutely. So Wesley is going to tuck in behind that number 84 now. Right now, your leaders all nose to tail. Your first side-by-side isn't until you get back to the battle for 4th position. But don't look now, the 712 of Seminara. He's found his way back to the back bumper of that number 24 of Joe DeSpirito, and they're coming up quickly on the inside of the 90 of Bernie Mobbs.
They get a big enough run, that 90 will certainly duck down there, but then Wesley and Dante will probably see that as well. White flag in the air. Who's got the fumes to get back to the checkered flag? Your top 3 looking for their first win on the season.
Right now, Josh Metallic trying real hard to make that upper middle line work, but he just doesn't quite have the momentum. Right now, we're keeping an eye peeled. How close are these guys on fuel? Metallic now to the outside of Mobbs. Wesley looks to the outside of the 84 of Ricky. 54 Mcclure looks to the inside of the 90 of Mobbs. Seth, I think we might have guys starting to sputter a little bit 4 wide.
4 wide for second as Wesley has to exit out of that battle. Dante Ricky on the bottom, hugging that inside line. He's got Mcclure behind him. Donnie Garrett's picked up 7 spots since the restart. Wesley up and over as Dante and Mcclure are going to get side by side coming to the line. Garrett pulls the back bumper of the 84. Dante has won tonight at Talladega. He may have just clinched himself a spot in the playoffs with that victory.
Huge victory for the number 84 of Dante Ricky, masterfully saving enough fuel to make it to the end of the race. Coming off of turn 4, I believe the 88 of Wesley may have run out of fuel, then got turned into the outside wall. Cars collected outside next to him as well, and next thing we knew, the 88 was barrel rolling into the tri-oval. Many cars collected in that, but the unofficial top 3 at this moment, Ricky, Garrett, and Mcclure. Great. What a great finish, Seth. Considering we didn't even know if these guys were going to make it on gas. Not only did they make it on gas, but they gave us one hell of a show, too.
They definitely did. Boy, Grant Wesley was the one guy we were kind of wondering about, and he ran out of fuel going into turn 3. Almost makes me wonder, probably the rest of the field would not have been able to make it another lap, as we'll see if Dante Ricky's got enough fuel to do a burnout. This may be the answer. Looks like his teammate Sonny Tallman's having to kind of help push him back to the start-finish line.
Yeah, no, that 84 car is absolutely 100% out of fuel, getting the push, as you mentioned, from his teammate of Sonny Tallman. Dante Ricky, a victory. And I guess that's how you do donuts when you're out of gas. What a great showing there. But as we saw, Dante Ricky, who was able to secure 2 victories last season, this will all but lock him into the top 20. He came into tonight's race just 5 points out of that 20th position. So now not only does he have that guaranteed win to the playoffs, but that'll put him in. So we heard him say it last week, Seth. He needed wins to get in. He got it tonight.
This is a driver who missed the season opener, struggled in the first 5 or 6 races of the season, then started to slowly climb his way up to the 20th position in points. And here tonight, as you said, the 5 points behind the 20th position in the standings, and this victory is going to make him one of the drivers potentially to be battling for the championship. But the task isn't done yet. He's got to remain in the top 20 in points next week in order for that playoff spot to be clinched.
Oh, we know Dante Ricky can do it. He's proven himself a worthy competitor, not just working himself to the top 20 in points, but also securing himself a victory. So, assuming he can bring that car home in one piece, I think he's going to be absolutely just fine. So, we covered your top three. Fourth place was Joe DeSpirito. Bob Seminara would round out the top five. Bernie Mobbs, Terry Bombard, my apologies, Chris Elliott, Hank Middleton, Jeff Cravello, bringing home a nice 10th place finish. So a lot of these guys that were kind of mid-pack, really benefited from Grant Wesley running out of fuel there, Seth, because even though Wesley fell out, as we mentioned before we went back to green, it wasn't just him affected. It was the cars around him losing a lot of momentum as well.
Absolutely. Grant Wesley, if he had finished in the top 5 tonight, more than likely we would have said he's locked into the playoffs on points heading into our regular season finale. Not so now, as he ended up bringing that car across the start-finish line in the 20th position. Jeff Cravello, his chances of pointing his way in look a little bit better with a top 10 run. And in regards to the bracket challenge, it looks like it will be Bernie Mobbs and Chuck Mcclure that will be battling it out in the final round, as was Mcclure finishing in third and Bernie Mobbs finishing in sixth. So close battle still with their competitors, though. Jeremy Jeffries finished back in 24th, but Jeff Cravello gave a big run there to Bernie Mobbs in the closing stages, finishing up there in the top 10.
And again, race fans, we remind you this is all unofficial until the race is officially reviewed by RTR, RTG admins, and directors. As it stands right now, as you mentioned, that would put our other two to the final round of the bracket. And Seth, I'm looking at the points right now, and they have been updated. Joe DeSpirito now with a 24-point lead over Bob Seminara, 32 over Chuck Mcclure. So that 24 is still standing strong on top of that point leaderboard, and we've heard him talk about how important those bonus points are come playoff time.
Yeah, and the points must have been really close from 15th back to around 25th, because Dante Ricky with this victory will be gaining 6 spots up to 16th place. So that'll give him a nice little cushion back to that 20th position in points. Around that top 10 area, Billy Elliser, former winner of the season, falls out along with Jerm Lewis. Bernie Mobbs and Chris Elliott are going to move their way in. So the pressure's still on for those drivers, but at least now they're trying to preserve their top 10 rather than trying to race their way into the top 10.
Absolutely. So little guys there might be a few guys that we have in panic mode come race number 9 next week, but until then, there's a couple guys that are feeling pretty happy right now.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk with them. We're going to start with our third place finisher, Chuck Mcclure. Hey, Chuck, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Hi, Zach. Seth, how you doing?
Man, we're doing good. Man, you've got a lot of momentum on your side. Doesn't seem to matter whether you're driving the 17 or the 54 car here tonight. Another solid outing for you in third place. We already know that you're locked into the playoffs with your win earlier on this season. How important is it to you to have this good momentum heading down towards the end of the regular season?
Oh, it's really important. I don't want to peak too quickly, but yeah, the momentum, we'll take all we can get.
Chuck, given that number 54 a really good run for its money tonight as you run that car for Robbie Nisus. We know Robbie out with surgery. Kind of an up and down night. A lot of action happening all around you out there on a racetrack, but able to bring home a top 3.
Yeah, there was at one point I think I was right behind the 39, and I don't know how we made it through there. We got lucky, and yeah, got lucky to get third too.
All right, so Chuck, we know that you guys were close on fuel. You had those final 2 laps that you had to run. I know that you guys made it back around, but if you guys had had maybe a 3-lap shootout, a 4-lap shootout, could you guys have made it that far?
No way. The light fuel pressure light come on right when I crossed the line. No way we were going to make it around again at speed.
All right, Chuck. So unofficially, you will go into the final race of the regular season next week. Third in points, 32 out behind Joe DeSpirito. We know you've got that win, so you secured into the playoffs. Well, for race number 9, what are you thinking? Are you thinking bonus points? Are you thinking win? Or are you just thinking ahead of the playoffs at this point?
One race at a time. I want to win every race. I think we all do. Get all the points I can, and that will lead to good bonus points in the chase and give me a little bit of a cushion. And Also, I'm also going for that bracket series win too. So, we need to keep an eye on that.
All right, Chuck. Well, great to see you with that third place finish tonight. Always great to talk to you as normal. Shout outs, thank you, sponsors. What do you got for us tonight?
Well, I appreciate RTG having this awesome place to race. I mean, you've seen the guys out there. Anybody can win these things. I appreciate Robbie asking me to drive his car. I hope he gets feeling better soon and can get back out there and drive his own car. And you guys always do a great job. I have people at work telling me that you guys, they think there's a real race on TV, and they look and it's a sim race, but it kind of is a real race.
Well, that's Chuck Mcclure. He's going to finish third place here tonight at Talladega. Good standing heading into the regular season finale next week. Good luck there, Chuck. We hope you close it out strong.
Thank you, fellas.
And I got a notification from the driver that he filled in for here tonight. Robbie Nices, that 54 car has finished good the last couple of weeks with Dante Ricky second last week. Mcclure filling in tonight, finishing third. Robbie's saying he's very proud of Chuck and the ride he gave the number 54 Ron John Surf Shop Dodge tonight. The last 2 weeks have made him proud of the drivers at RTG. The willingness to jump into others' cars and give it 110% is gratifying. Thank you to Chuck, and good win to Dante. Let's see if we can now get our second place finisher, Donnie Garrett. Hey, Donnie, it's Zach and Seth up here in the booth. You got us?
I got you guys.
Man, your car was flying on that last restart. Restarted 10th, finish in the second position. One thing that we noticed was that you had come to pit road under the last caution to top off the fuel tank. If this thing had been a 3-lap shootout, was this race going to fall into your lap?
I think so. Yeah, I think we'd have been okay. We definitely were good on gas because I was clutching and doing everything I could there, and I kind of just sit back in the pack. I've been playing that gas for the last probably 30 laps, and just trying to dodge all the craziness. Man, that was crazy coming from the back. But my God, I mean, to think that I was going to finish second tonight, I saw Chuck make that move at the bottom, and it was open, and I took it, and I'd like to push Chuck to win there. But great job for Dante getting that win, and hey, I'll take a second all night, man. This is an awesome finish to have to start that far back.
Yeah, we saw you get involved in a couple of incidents here tonight, and the points gap between yourself and that 10th in the standings cutoff line was rather small. Now it's grown to 28 points heading into next week. So how does that help the mentality and the confidence level, knowing that you've got yourself a really good chance now of pointing your way into the playoffs?
Top 15, somewhere in the top 15 should lock me in. Like I say, I'm playing the points now, and I need to run safe next week. I don't need to finish 35th, because I mean we had almost a full field tonight. So next week I need to get a decent finish. Somewhere in the top 15 would be fine. I was kind of throwing caution to the wind there at the end because, like I say, I need to get up in there. But damn, just so close. That's 3 second place finishes for me.
Woo! Nature boy, Zach up here in the booth. Got me?
I got you, brother.
Hey, Nate. Hey, it's good to talk to you, Donnie. Great second place finish. Now, Seth and I documented your run throughout the night, and you even mentioned how crazy it was with everything that was going on out there on the racetrack. Caught up, involved in a couple wrecks, but still able to rebound for that strong second place finish. I got to ask you, when you get caught up in a couple wrecks like that, especially as big as they are, how does that affect you mentally when you go to restart that race?
You're gun shy. You get gun shy after about 2 of them, and you just start watching. You just start watching for the checks and guys coming off the bottom lane, going up and hitting guys in the second lane, and then the blocking, the crowding, just all the stuff you normally see here at these super speedways, and you anticipate them. If you're good at this, you anticipate those wrecks. There was 3 or 4 that happened that I saw coming probably 100 yards before they happened, and was able to make a position move to get myself out of it. Got run over several times, from behind. I got stopped, and of course the guys behind me, they just come through there like a bat out of hell and run over you. And but no damage. I didn't get any damage out of any of those wrecks. I mean, I drove out of those wrecks and trying to keep my car off the wall and stuff like that. So no damage, but like I say, all night just biding my time. Just that's all I want to do is try to get somewhere in the top 10. And like I say, a second place, man, that's like 2 victories to me tonight.
All right, Downey. So right now, 38 points, your cushion between yourself and that 10th place position. You did mention your second place finish this season. How bad are you chomping at the bit to go out there and finally get that monkey off your back?
Well, I mean, a win could put me upside down, and back to 30th place. So that's not important. Right now, what's important is just getting silently into this chase. I'm going to drop probably to the bottom because I don't have any wins. Now, if I get an opportunity, I definitely would want to shoot for a win to maybe put myself ahead of 2 or 3 guys that's going to point their way in possibly. But I'm going to be coming from the bottom of the chase and just try to have a nice quiet chase, just enough, and see where we can take this thing. And just got to get there first. We still got one more week. Anything can happen. A 35th, 38th, 40th place finish, that's not good. So we need to be somewhere in that top 15 to be secure. And hopefully that's what we can do next week.
All right, Donnie, always great to talk to you as always. Hey, man, sponsors, shout out, thank yous. What do you got for us tonight?
Hey, I just want to give a big shout out to RGG. You guys are great, man. I go back and actually watch these races the next day and kind of break them down and just kind of watch. And you guys together, you remind me of Neil Bonnet and Ned Jarrett. Just a great combination. Really feed off of each other. And man, you guys are just you guys are definitely great at what you do, and we appreciate it. And looking forward to next year with you guys and trying to work towards that. And this is awesome, man. This TV racing is just amazing.
That's Donnie Garrett, second place here tonight at Talladega, heading into that season finale, looking good to point his way in. Best of luck to you next week, Donnie. Maybe we'll see you race your way in and win your way in next week.
Maybe. We'll see. Woo!
And down to victory lane we go. Let's get a word with tonight's winner, Dante Ricky. Hey, Dante, it's Zach and Seth up here in the booth. You got us?
I made it. Hey, Seth. Hey, Zach.
Man, last week we talked to you with your second place finish. You said here tonight you had to come into this race in the must-win mentality. You were able to do it. I got to wonder, how much of a sigh of relief did you breathe when you crossed the start-finish line P1?
That was an amazing feeling. I was so happy. I even yelled and screamed right there. Yeah, man, right when I got to the line. It was an amazing feeling to win the race and finally be relieved that I have a win to help fall back on if I need to get into the chase. It's really going to be important. But it is halfway there. We're almost to the chase. One more race next week. And that was a major, major accomplishment. Really, really big deal tonight.
Now, we just talked with Donnie Garrett, the second place finisher, and he has the opportunity to point his way in. He said that next week he's just going to try and stay out of trouble, try and get a top 15. Now, in your case, you've won and you've moved into the top 20 in points. There is a bit of a gap between you and 20th in the standings, but it's not mathematically impossible that if you had a bad race next week, that you might fall back outside of the top 20. So what's the mentality going into the finale? Is it to try and win and get more bonus points? Or are you kind of with the same mentality of just kind of preserve what you've got?
This season has been a roller coaster. And once the final points are edited this week, right now I am only 9 points above 20th unofficially. Of course, these are going to change come the middle of the week next week. But 21st is Sonny Tallman, my teammate, and that's looks like about 12 points. 20 points almost back to 21st. So the goal really appears to be that I need to just finish the race and not have a catastrophic disaster, failure, you name it. That just can't happen next week. We need to get the car to the finish to ensure that we can point our way into the chase. And yeah, I'm not going to have a very favorable seed of bonus points, but my work will definitely be cut out for me once that chase rolls around here later this month. So next week, we need to get to the finish. And if we can do that, I think we'll be in a safe position to make it in. And, just as long as we don't have any major issue or engine problem or anything, I think we'll be in good shape and just hope for the best.
Dante, we just talked to you last night, finishing second at Atlanta. We talked to you here in Victory Lane tonight. So I'm going to ask you, how much of a factor does momentum play, especially when you look at this Tally Challenge Series? Because we sometimes see guys get on a run of 3 or 4 really, really strong races. And on the flip side of that, sometimes you get yourself in a little bit of a rut. But with your team running as well as you are right now, how much does that help your confidence level heading into next week and probably even the playoffs?
Well, I really didn't expect to have that good of an opportunity tonight, and it was just amazing to be able to come out here and win. And, I've had a lot of success this week here at RTG, and some nights are always tough and challenging, but other nights always seem to be your night. And it's either your night or not your night. and I was just really happy to be able to have that opportunity to race with Chuck and Donnie and Sonny Tolman and Grant Wesley and Joe DeSpirito and Bob Seminara and Bernie and everyone who really gave it their all tonight to try and get a good finish. And strategy and momentum, your race strategy is the most important thing of it. And tonight I started in the back. But considering that I was also very busy before the race tonight, I really didn't have much of an option. Considering a lot of people were in the race, we had, I think, 39 cars take the grid tonight. So pitting, we were expecting to have green flag pit stops, and that didn't happen. But we didn't let that bother us. We raced for the win. We didn't bother saving fuel. I knew I was in a position I had to get up there and lead as many laps as I could and get in there and race. So momentum is a big deal here. You have to have some energy from the night before, the week before, and carry that with you to have a good race the next time you're out there. But definitely my work was cut out for me tonight, and we did as much as we could to make sure that we got that race win, and I'm just so proud to be able to be in this position right now.
All right, Dante, once again, always good to talk to you in victory lane. So one more question for you, and then I'll let you talk about a little bit about your sponsors and your shout outs and thank yous and everything like this. So if I had asked you a month ago what you felt your chances are to get into the playoffs, I'm going to guess it would have been quite a different answer to what I'm going to ask you now that you know that you're going to be in the playoffs and we see you run as strong as we do week in and week out. What do you think your chances are for that championship for?
We're going to give it a shot. I'll tell you what, once that chase begins, it's a new beginning. And it's basically going to be a new season there for those final 4 races. And we're going to go out there with the mentality that we can accomplish a lot and get those top 5 finishes and hopefully get those race wins, which are very challenging to earn. And if I had to give you a percentage right now, I would definitely say I'm going to give it a 70 to 75% shot of being in that final 4 there come April. And we're going to give it a shot. We'll give it our best.
All right, Dante, really looking to watch you try to play out that momentum and those odds right there, because that sounds like a lot of confidence, and that'll give you a good boost heading into the playoffs here. So shout outs, thank you, sponsors. What do you got for us tonight, Dante?
Big thank you to all of my family, mom and dad, brother and sister, grandparents, aunts and uncles, everybody watching tonight. Also, especially to our RTG admins and owners, Terry Bauman, David Cannon, Sean Prime, all of the admin staff, Josh for putting on this amazing series with Wiley. Big thank you to Sonny Tolman. I know we didn't really get that opportunity to work together tonight as we had planned. We had big plans to get up front and really draft in the pack and get close together and work, but that just didn't seem to be. Sonny and I had different race positions and we were never able to work together. But big thank you to him and making it so exciting there at the end. And it's just an amazing group of drivers here, old and new. Everyone who comes into this league week in and week out to make it such an amazing place to race. It's an awesome environment, and big thank you to all the drivers for coming out here and making this work tonight.
With his win here tonight, Dante Ricci becomes the 7th driver to lock himself into the Season 52 playoffs for the Talladega Challenge. Congratulations there, Dante. And, we talked about momentum with Donnie, and of course, we've talked about momentum with you as well. Looking forward to seeing if you can keep this momentum going down the home stretch here, the regular season finale next week.
Thanks, guys. And I got to tell you, that was one crazy last lap. I had to do all I could, and man, that was just so much fun. Thank you, guys. Good job on the broadcast tonight.
And so as Dante continues to celebrate his victory, just scanning over the points here, Zach. Now, we know the scenario that anybody inside of the top 20, if they go to victory lane like Dante did here tonight, they lock themselves into the playoffs. But there's only 30 points separating 10th down through 20th. So theoretically, with the large fields we've had here week after week, not only do drivers have an opportunity to be in the top 20 and win their way into the playoffs, most of them have a shot to point their way into the playoffs next week.
Everybody could absolutely point their way into the playoffs potentially last week, as the major storyline over the past 2 or 3 weeks that we've documented have been major point swings. And a big big proof of that was tonight with the multiple huge incidents that we saw out there on the racetrack, which ultimately ended up with us losing about 10 to 13 cars from what started the race. Again, tonight was the record on the season with 39 cars starting. And when you look at that many cars starting, that's that many more cars that you could benefit from or fall behind in a race. So yes, like you said, everybody really still in contention of this thing, but don't forget, you still got a lot of really capable drivers that could play spoiler and go out and get a win too.
Yeah, this week and last week, we saw quite a number of yellow flags, which we kind of expect because as each week ticks away and the opportunity to make your way into the playoffs gets thinner and thinner, we expect to see people make some desperation moves in an attempt to make their way into the postseason. Based on the fact that next week we're going to have so many different drivers with so many different agendas. Drivers that have already won, they want to continue to rack up the bonus points. They want to try and find victory lane again. Drivers that can win their way in, they're going to try and battle and be up there at the front. Drivers that are trying to point their way in, they may be either trying to be aggressive and try and keep themselves ahead of those drivers that are right around them in the points, or in the case of Donnie Garrett, Jeff Cravello, Grant Wesley, they may just ride, try and preserve where they are in the point standings. With all those different agendas going on track there at over 180 miles per hour, what type of a race are we looking at for our regular season finale?
What type of a race we're looking at for our regular season finale, man, I don't know what to tell you, Seth, because just every time we think that we've got the combination down for these races and what we are going to see, we are usually absolutely 100% on the opposite side wrong. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But one thing that I will tell you is there's going to be a lot of drivers with that headache powder and some antacids at hand because, man, the anxiety level is super high right now. And if the action tonight is indicative at all of what we're going to see in our regular season finale next week, buckle in, race fans. You're in for a hell of a show.
Race 8 had to set the stage for our regular season finale. It did not disappoint here this evening. Folks, you're going to want to tune in next week to find out who those drivers are that are going to make it into the playoffs. We could have as many as 13, 14 drivers that could be in the playoff grid depending on what happens in next week's festivities. But a great one here tonight. Dante Ricky now locks himself into the playoffs, and after a wild finish, Talladega, again, just does not disappoint. Zach, appreciate you joining me in the booth with this one tonight.
Absolutely, Seth. A pleasure as always. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Seth. Everybody at Flatout Racing Network, the drivers, the race directors, owners, admins at RTR, RTG, and of course, you, the race fans watching online. We appreciate you being here with us every week and can't wait to see you next week for the regular season finale. Thanks a lot, Seth.
One final week, one final chance, one final race to make it into the playoffs for the Talladega Challenge, and it will take place at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Thursday night. For Zach Fremont, I'm Seth Cole. We'll see you guys next week as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.